Hi everybody, it's David here from Strike Percussion, and today I'm here to talk to you about one of my favourite instruments, the Crotales. Crotales, or sometimes called Crotales, or also known as antique cymbals, are a tuned percussion instrument. They're made of metal, and in this case they're made of the same metal as cymbals. As such, they're actually more commonly made by cymbal makers than they are by manufacturers of other tuned percussion instruments like marimbas and xylophones and glockenspiels and so on. The particular set I have here in front of me is made by Zildjian. You can also get sets from Sabian, Paiste, Dream cymbals, and many other cymbal manufacturers. Crotales are not a cheap instrument. Here in Australia, a 1-octave set of Crotales from Zildjian will set you back around 6,000 to 6,500 Australian dollars. And that includes the full setup of the actual discs themselves, the mounting bar, a cymbal stand, and a case. The mounting bar in this case just mounts onto any old cymbal stand. This is a Pearl C930 cymbal stand that I use for my Crotales. But you do need the whole setup in order to use your Crotales. And that's just for 1 octave. The octave that I have here, this is the low octave. The bottom note is written middle C. Up 1 octave through to C in the middle of the treble staff. The high octave set, which I also have, starts at this C here and goes up 1 octave to the C above the treble staff. On the low octave set with Zildjian, you can remove this top C, the whole section slides off, and you can bring your high octave set in so you don't duplicate that middle C. Or if you have them stacked on top of each other, you can leave the middle C, the C in the middle, I should say, not the middle C, that's middle C. The C in the middle can be left in place so you can have different options with either having them in line or stacked. Because they're such an expensive instrument, they're a little bit impractical to buy. That 13,000 odd dollars you could spend on a 2-octave set of Crotales could buy you a marimba. It could buy you several Glockenspiels. It could buy you a vibraphone. It could buy many instruments that may be more valuable to you depending on what kind of ensemble you're working with. If you're in an orchestra, there are definitely more valuable instruments you could buy. With a wind orchestra, if you've got the money, go for it. They're a great instrument to have in the arsenal. But at the end of the day, they don't come up often enough to really justify spending that much money on them. So, if you can't justify buying them, and you want to use actual Crotales, what can you do? Well, you can hire them. That's always a great option. But sometimes people hiring these instruments don't want to have an instrument that appears on stage in the performance the first time they actually play it. They might want to have them for a few weeks beforehand to rehearse and get used to playing them. That can also be a little bit financially cost prohibitive. So we have some other options for instruments that can emulate Crotales. Right here I have a Glockenspiel. This is an instrument most people will be familiar with, but the sound is very different. And over here, this is another instrument that I describe as like a poor man's set of Crotales. They're a really great set to have if you can't afford the real ones, and especially if you want to have a few weeks of rehearsals with something that's quite similar. Now, let's have a listen to the Crotales and we'll see what they sound like. I have a few different pairs of mallets here we'll use to compare. This set of mallets is a set of Grover M8 Glockenspiel mallets. They're a 1-inch phenolic ball, very standard Glockenspiel mallet. And this is what they sound like on the Crotales. As you can hear, the sound of the Crotales is a very rich sound. Lots of overtones, nice clear fundamental sound of the pitch of the note, but all those overtones creating a very rich resonant sound that rings on for a very long time. Very hard to get that with any other instrument. We'll try a couple of other pairs of mallets just to get a comparison of the sound. These are from Innovative Percussion. They are their OS9 linen phenolic mallets. They have a similar sound to the Grover ones. They're also a 1-inch ball. They're a slightly brighter sound. A little bit more front on the sound. Lastly, another pair from Innovative Percussion. These are ENS 360 aluminium headed Crotale mallets. So Innovative actually do label these as Crotale mallets. Once again, they're a 1-inch ball and they have a much brighter brighter sound than the linen phenolic mallets. Like with any instrument, changing your mallets will change the kind of sound you have. Aluminium, being a lightweight metal, doesn't carry the weight of sound that you get with some of the other mallets, but gives you a very clear, precise attack. So, what do we get if we use those mallets on some of the other instruments? Well, let's have a listen to a Glockenspiel. This is an instrument that most people will be very familiar with. A Glockenspiel is an instrument that most bands and orchestras will have in their arsenal. They may even have more than one if they're lucky. And if they have more than one, it can be easy to use them to substitute for Crotales. If I once again use these same mallets, these are Glockenspiel mallets after all, on the Glockenspiel, on the same notes, this is what it sounds like. So this particular Glockenspiel, a very nice Glockenspiel, this is the Adams GD26 Concert Series box Glockenspiel. I think it's one of the nicest box Glockenspiels that you can buy. In Australia it sells for around $4,000, so obviously a lot cheaper than a 2-octave set of Crotales. And you get more than a half and a bit octaves. It goes up to a high D. Lovely instrument. I'll use the linen phenolics again, just for the comparison of sound. Slightly brighter. And then lastly, the ensemble Crotale mallets. I wouldn't normally use these on a Glockenspiel, but for the demonstration, this is what they sound like. If I wanted to use aluminium mallets on Glockenspiel, I do have some other ones that have smaller heads that are a little bit better and a very, very light, delicate sound. Using the Glockenspiel, obviously you get a very clear fundamental sound. There's not the same wash of overtones, it's a very pure kind of sound. Very different kind of sound to the Crotales. So what can we do if we've only got a Glockenspiel and we want to emulate the sound of Crotales? Well, yeah, you can use normal Glockenspiel mallets and just play the part that way. It still doesn't quite sound right. But there's a company there, the American drum company, have made these specifically for this purpose. These are called Convertabell mallets. And really all they are is a finger cymbal on a stick. The finger cymbal is sitting loose so it can vibrate quite freely. If I take one of my mallets here and strike the finger cymbal, it sounds like this. So you can hear there's a wash of overtones there from a finger cymbal, but there's no definite pitch involved. If I take these mallets and play the Glockenspiel with them, this is the sort of sound we get. As you can hear, we get all of the pitch from the Glockenspiel, whilst we get the spread of overtones from the actual finger cymbals themselves. It makes a similar kind of sound to Crotales, and in a pinch, it will work. If you're rehearsing and you need something to rehearse with, it can work. I'll give you a different demonstration. This is the notes from the Debussy Prelude. So the Prélude de l'après-midi d'un faune by Debussy, early 20th century work that was one of the earlier works to use antique cymbals, as they were known at the time. And that's the sort of sound you would get using these mallets on a Glockenspiel. But they're not the only option that we have available if we want to have a Crotale-like sound without having real Crotales. That's where these guys come in. So these are made by Steve Weiss Percussion over in America. They are one of the main percussion retailers in America, and these are called saucer bells. So the bells on the saucer bells are essentially the same as the kinds of bells you would find on a bell tree, but they are tuned specifically. Bell tree bells, you'll usually find some rough pitches in there, but they're not exactly precisely tuned. These ones have been. They sound a lot more similar to Crotales because they have that same spread of overtones. They're not as resonant and they have a little bit more fundamental in them. They sit about halfway between the Glockenspiel and the Crotales. Have a listen. So once again, that was using the 1/8 inch phenolic mallets. I'll go to the linen phenolics. And then lastly, the aluminium Crotal mallets. So as you can hear, it is definitely a sound that sits somewhere in between the Glockenspiel and the actual Crotales. Not as loud and as resonant as the actual Crotales, doesn't ring on as long, but that has its advantages too. You may listen to that and think, yeah, that would sound a lot better in a small rehearsal room. Certainly in this room that I'm in right now, it's a lot easier on the ears than playing the Crotales at full volume. Another benefit to the saucer bells over a Glockenspiel is that you can bow the saucer bells much like you can bow the Crotales. The way that these saucer bells come, they come as a set of bells. They're actually on a rope, and much like the Crotales, you get the bells and you buy the mounting frame separately. And you can set the bells up to either be set up like I have here, where the natural bells are sitting underneath the frame and the accidental bells are sitting in the middle. You can turn the accidental accidental bells upside down and have them on top, or you could have the natural bells sitting inside as well. It probably wouldn't work on the low octave set for the naturals because, as you can see here, the inside space would not allow for this particular bell to sit there. But you've got options with setting these up, and that might make it a lot easier for bowing the saucer bells. So if you need to do bowed Crotale work and you need an alternate, the saucer bells are definitely a great option, as well as obviously sounding like Crotales if you just need normal Crotale sounds. So compared to a set of Crotales, the saucer bells are a lot cheaper. I can't remember off the top of my head how much I paid for them from the States, but I think it was less than $1,500 Australian, all told, for a 2-octave set. I paid a little bit extra to buy some cases for them. I'm using Mark Tree cases from Treeworks Chimes. They fit quite nicely in those cases, and that keeps them safe for storage. They, again, just go on a cymbal stand. I'm using a Pearl BC 830 cymbal stand to hold these up at the moment. Right now I don't have them screwed down, so yes, they're flopping around a little bit, but you just pop your wing bolt on the top of them and they'll stay nice and secure. So there's your other option that you can have available. The saucer bells from Steve Weiss. Nice sounding instrument, nice and tuned with that same spread of overtones, not as resonant, not quite as cutting, but for a rehearsal instrument, excellent, and for a budget option for Crotale-like sounds, also an excellent option. But the Convertabell mallets, if you want the most budget option, but also still very effective, these are a really great option. They were around $100 if I remember correctly. And they got here very quickly from American Drum Company. Shout out to those guys, they make some wonderful products. I really like the American Drum Company products that I have in my arsenal. So yeah, these are a great option. Also, if you have very limited space, if you don't need to share the Glockenspiel at the same time, for example, if the Glockenspiel and Crotales going at the same time, it might be a bit hard to share the instrument if you're limited on space or if you don't have a second Glockenspiel. But if you can spare a Glockenspiel, or you don't have to play at the same point with Glock and Crotales, these are a great option. So once again, just to finish off, we'll give a demonstration of these mallets on the Glock, and then some notes on the Crotales and on the saucer bells. There we have it. So, comparison of actual real Crotales along with some great substitution options. The saucer bells from Steve Weiss Music, and of course a Glockenspiel with the Convertabell mallets from the American Drum Company. All of these are available for rent from Strike Percussion if you are in Sydney and you want to look at renting some instruments. I have had inquiries about the Crotales and for longer term rentals of the Crotales, and have suggested the saucer bells as a great option. So if you're looking at something like that, you can do the saucer bells for a few weeks for rehearsals before taking the Crotales to the end of the program where you want to use the last couple of rehearsals and performance date. The Saucerbells will give you a bit more of a physical representation. It's a bit more similar to the Crotales, and a sound that's a little bit more similar without taking up another Glockenspiel. Hope you've enjoyed that. Please let me know if you'd like to see any more content on unusual instruments and ways around unusual problems, like how do you solve a problem like Crotales. Thanks, see you later.